It's not often that a nation declares war on a corporation, but that's exactly what has happened.
The adversary, Western leaders proclaimed, isn't a country. It's Huawei. We will not cooperate with them. Huawei is a national security threat.
Those words weren't just policy. They were a warning shot in a new kind of war, one fought not with missiles, but with microchips. Yet beneath the headlines lies a deeper truth. This confrontation was never just about Huawei. It was about power, technological power, and who would command the digital world. On January 18, 2025, silence fell across China's semiconductor industry. Over $15 billion worth of state-of-the-art manufacturing equipment went dead in an instant. Entire chip production lines froze. Precision systems shut down. Machines that once symbolized human brilliance, each more costly than a private jet, became cold, unresponsive shells. This wasn't a malfunction. It was deliberate. The opening move in what Beijing would later call Operation Sovereign Silicon, a bold act of technological rebellion that would change everything. For decades, the global chip industry functioned like a perfectly synchronized symphony. ASML in the Netherlands created miracle lithography systems that could carve circuits smaller than a virus. Taiwan's TSMC transformed those designs into the world's fastest chips. American firms like Intel and Nvidia provided the blueprints that powered our digital lives. And China, the manufacturing giant, assembled, scaled, and shipped it all to the world. The system worked, until the orchestra suddenly fell apart. Under relentless U.S. pressure, the Dutch government canceled ASML's export licenses for advanced lithography systems bound for China. Overnight, Beijing's chip factories were cut off from essential software updates, maintenance, and spare parts. Then came Taiwan's TSMC, which, bowing to sanctions, ended all advanced collaborations with Chinese companies. China was effectively locked out of the technological frontier. Western analysts predicted disaster. Without ASML's EUV machines, they said, China will be stuck a decade behind, limited to 28-nanometer chips, while the rest of the world moves toward 3. But Beijing had anticipated this very moment. Since the first U.S. sanctions in 2022, China had been quietly building its own technological lifeboat. Over $75 billion in funding poured into domestic semiconductor programs through national banks and sovereign funds. Tens of thousands of engineers from Huawei, SMIC, and Tsinghua Uni Group were reassigned to confidential government-backed projects. Their mission was singular: achieve self-sufficiency, whatever the cost. From satellite images, the transformation was unmistakable. In Shanghai's Lingang district, new fabrication plants sprang up one after another. Shenzhen's Longhua zone evolved into an entire semiconductor city. Chengdu and Wuhan became hubs for chip packaging and research. Billions of dollars, thousands of workers, and an unwavering goal: break free from Western dependence. Then came the revelation that shook the global tech world. In March 2025, a little-known Shenzhen company named Sequer revealed a breakthrough: China's first immersion lithography machine capable of producing chips below 7 nanometers. It wasn't theory. They showed live demonstrations, microscope images, and verified data that stunned industry veterans. Only days later, Huawei unveiled its Mate 60 Pro, powered by a 7-nanometer Kirin processor made entirely within China, using no ASML equipment, no Western components, just Chinese engineering pushed to the edge. Meanwhile, deep within China's state labs, teams were finding new ways to defy the limits of physics. Dr. Liu Xiaoming and his researchers at the Institute of Microelectronics developed what insiders called hyper-optimized computational lithography, using AI algorithms to push older tools far beyond their intended limits. By mid-2025, SMIC was mass-producing 5-nanometer chips with equipment made entirely at home. Yields were lower than TSMC's, but that didn't matter. For Beijing, independence mattered more than perfection. The fallout was immediate. ASML's service centers in China went dark. Thousands of Dutch engineers left. TSMC's training programs vanished. Yet for every Western expert who departed, a dozen Chinese specialists filled the gap. Salaries skyrocketed. Housing incentives, bonuses, and stock packages turned China's semiconductor sector into a gold rush. Global markets trembled. ASML's shares plunged over 30%. TSMC lost nearly $80 billion in market value. Meanwhile, Chinese semiconductor companies surged to record highs. By August 2025, Chinese-built supercomputers cracked the global top 500 rankings, powered entirely by homegrown chips. Huawei's 5G base stations outperformed Western competitors. BYD's electric cars featured Chinese-made processors rivaling Tesla's. The message was clear: China was no longer chasing, it was catching up. Yet this new era came with new dangers. Apple, with over $500 billion invested in China, found itself trapped between two worlds. More than 80% of its suppliers operated inside Chinese industrial zones. What was once a symbol of efficiency had become a geopolitical minefield. One wrong move and Apple's supply chain could collapse overnight. But the momentum couldn't be stopped. Across China, fortified AI data centers began appearing. Massive, underground shielded complexes built to protect the nation's digital core from espionage and sabotage. The US and Europe raced to respond with new policies and alliances, from Washington's Sandbox Act to Brussels' AI Integrity Initiative. But no legislation could undo what was already in motion. By late 2025, Chinese firms had filed over 1,000 patents in advanced chipmaking and lithography. Then came the moment that stunned even the skeptics. Huawei, once blacklisted and banned from Western markets, announced the creation of its own extreme ultraviolet lithography machine, the most complex technology on Earth, once thought to be ASML's unbreakable monopoly. Each ASML EUV machine costs more than a Boeing 787 Dreamliner and takes 40 shipping containers to deliver. Experts had said China was 15 years behind. Huawei proved them wrong in less than 5. But they hadn't just copied the West, they had reinvented it. Huawei's engineers used a new process called laser-induced discharge plasma, LDP, vaporizing tin between charged electrodes to generate the precise EUV wavelength needed to etch 3-nanometer circuits, 30,000 times thinner than a human hair. The implications were staggering. Controlling EUV technology means controlling the building blocks of the digital age: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, autonomous systems, and advanced defense networks. Huawei's achievement didn't just close the gap, it flipped the balance of power. And Huawei wasn't done. They unveiled the Atlas SuperPod, a next-generation AI cluster built to rival NVIDIA's dominance. The Atlas 950 would connect over 8,000 of Huawei's custom Ascend chips, offering 6.7 times the computing power of NVIDIA's most advanced system, with 152 terabytes of memory, equivalent to the processing power of 300,000 high-end smartphones. In a few short years, Huawei had transformed from global outcast to the spearhead of China's technological revolution. Every sanction that aimed to cripple it had instead fueled its rise. What began as containment had become acceleration. By the end of 2025, the global semiconductor order had fractured beyond repair. The unified world of chips was gone, replaced by two competing universes, one led by the West, ASML, TSMC, NVIDIA, and the other by China, Huawei, SMIC, SKR. Two parallel systems, two ideologies, two visions of the digital future. And at the center of this divide stood Huawei, the company that the West tried to destroy, now standing as a symbol of defiance, innovation, and technological sovereignty. The war that began with sanctions and restrictions had evolved into a race for the soul of the digital age. And for the first time in modern history, that race no longer had a single leader. The future now belonged to whoever could imagine and build the impossible. Huawei isn't slowing down. Its roadmap outlines an even bolder vision. The Atlas 960 SuperPod, a computing titan set to launch in late 2027. This colossal machine will feature over 15,000 chips and deliver a jaw-dropping 30 exaflops of processing power. To put that into perspective, that's enough computational strength to simulate the entire human brain's neural network several times over. But this isn't just about performance. It's about timing, resilience, and strategy. As Western sanctions tightened, China didn't retreat. It responded by constructing a complete semiconductor ecosystem from the ground up. Through its massive National Integrated Circuit Fund, Beijing invested billions into chip design, manufacturing tools, testing equipment, and advanced materials, building an entirely independent tech universe that no longer relies on the West. The outcomes are undeniable. SMIC, China's premier chipmaker, managed to produce advanced 7-nanometer chips despite being entirely cut off from Western machinery and technology. What Western analysts once labeled impossible is now sitting inside Huawei's devices. It's a statement. China's pursuit of technological self-sufficiency is no longer theoretical. It's unfolding right before the world's eyes. Still, critics remain. Market commentator Jim Cramer dismisses China's chip progress, arguing that if they were truly world-class, the global market would already be dominated by them. Even Huawei's founder, Ren Zhengfei, concedes that American chips still outperform theirs in some areas. Yet that's missing the bigger picture. China isn't merely catching up, it's redefining the game. Regulators have already begun limiting NVIDIA's high-end RTX 6000D chips from being purchased or tested by major Chinese firms, signaling a major policy shift. The message is unmistakable. The era of technological dependency is over. And the consequences go far beyond smartphones. These advancements could position China at the forefront of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, self-driving vehicles, and next-generation electronics. The global AI chip industry, expected to surge from $150 billion in 2025 to $500 billion by 2028, is now a battleground, and Huawei is charging straight toward the center of it. The global tech order is being rewritten. For decades, the world operated under a simple model: the West invented and China manufactured. That era is ending. China is no longer the world's factory, it's becoming one of its innovation hubs. The future of computing won't orbit Silicon Valley alone. It will be defined by multiple ecosystems, each competing for dominance. The contest for technological leadership has entered a new chapter, and whoever leads it will control more than just the tech industry. They'll influence the world's balance of power. What makes this rivalry extraordinary is that it's no longer just about nations. It's about a company. The US has effectively declared war on Huawei. "We have met the enemy, and it is Huawei," said American officials. "We will not do business with them. They pose a national security threat." But beneath the rhetoric lies something deeper, a clash over who defines the future of technology. In November 2024, Huawei shocked the world. The company revealed a smartphone capable of directly communicating with satellites. No antennas, no specialized equipment, just a phone in your hand. It wasn't a typical product release. It was a moment that changed telecommunications forever. Imagine being stranded in the desert or lost in the mountains. No towers, no service, yet still able to connect to satellites orbiting 550 kilometers above Earth. Calls, messages, and even high-resolution photos transmitted from anywhere on the planet. While US tech giants were focused on expanding 5G, China was quietly building one of the most ambitious telecom infrastructures in history. In near secrecy, they launched 15 cutting-edge satellites, built a 3,000-kilometer network of ground stations, and compressed all that capability into a smartphone. Huawei engineers developed a power amplifier chip strong enough to send signals to satellites moving at 27,000 kilometers per hour, and an adaptive antenna system capable of tracking them in real time, maintaining flawless connections with just 0.7 seconds of delay, faster than many international calls. But Huawei's genius wasn't only in engineering, it was in strategy. While Washington was cutting it off from global supply chains, Huawei was building its own. Deprived of American chips, they designed their own. Banned from Google's Android ecosystem, they created Harmony OS Next, now hosting over 15,000 apps. What was meant to cripple the company became the catalyst for a breakthrough. Huawei didn't just survive the sanctions, it reinvented itself because of them. This new communication model changes everything. Traditional cellular networks require expensive towers, endless fiber cables, and massive power systems. Huawei's satellite system makes that old model nearly obsolete. One satellite can cover a region the size of Texas, and an entire constellation can blanket the globe. Remote areas in Africa, Asia, or the Arctic can now connect instantly, bypassing decades of infrastructure development. Even under sanctions, Huawei sold over 10 million smartphones in China in just one quarter of 2024, regaining its position as the country's second-largest smartphone maker. The Mate 60 Pro became a symbol of technological pride, with consumers lining up for hours to buy it. Meanwhile, Western telecom operators are realizing the scale of their disadvantage. Verizon spent $45 billion on 5G spectrum licenses, AT&T amped another $23 billion on upgrades, over $100 billion collectively. Huawei's entire satellite network? Roughly $8 billion for full global coverage. The comparison is stark. SpaceX's Starlink requires bulky antennas and external power. Apple's SOS system only works in emergencies in limited regions. Huawei's system? It functions everywhere, for everything, with just a phone. Journalists have used it to send images from the Gobi Desert. Sailors have used it in the Pacific Ocean. Rescue workers in Sichuan relied on it when traditional networks collapsed. By January 2025, the Pentagon convened emergency sessions recognizing the scale of China's lead. Internal assessments admitted that the U.S. Space Force is 5 years behind. The irony is striking. A revolution born from sanctions and restrictions turned into China's greatest strategic advantage. Every attempt to contain Huawei forced it to innovate faster, cheaper, and smarter. The ripple effects are already global. Kenya announced a national deal with Huawei for satellite coverage, saving over $12 billion in infrastructure costs. Bangladesh and Malaysia signed agreements for hybrid 5G satellite systems. Even European telecoms, despite pressure from Washington, are exploring partnerships. Maritime communication, once costly and limited, has been transformed. Cargo ships now act as mobile data centers, using Huawei devices to coordinate logistics and rescue operations during disasters. The implications for defense are just as significant. Traditional battlefield communication relies on vulnerable ground stations that can be easily targeted. With Huawei's network, every soldier's phone could become a secure satellite terminal, decentralized and resilient. The US isn't just racing to catch up, it's confronting a new reality. The battlefield has gone orbital. The economic fallout is reshaping the telecom industry. Infrastructure worth hundreds of billions is at risk of becoming obsolete. Investors are shifting away from traditional carriers and toward Chinese semiconductor companies like SMIC, whose valuations are skyrocketing. Huawei continues to expand. Satellite connectivity is now being integrated into vehicles, tablets, and laptops, all linked to China's Beidou navigation system. Latency has dropped to 0.5 seconds and performance keeps improving. This is not just a comeback story. It's a reinvention of global connectivity. For decades, Western companies dictated how the world communicated, from the birth of the internet to the rise of smartphones. But now, the next big leap has come from the East. The math says it all. The US spent over $100 billion on 5G. Huawei achieved global coverage for less than 10% of that cost. Apple has reassigned entire engineering divisions to develop satellite-based systems. Google is accelerating its own projects, but both are years behind. Huawei's lead, forged in adversity, has rewritten the rules of telecommunications. As 2025 unfolds, it's clear this isn't just about faster phones. It's about a total transformation of how humanity connects, communicates, and competes. The future of communication is here. What once demanded towers, cables, and vast infrastructure now fits in your pocket. The center of innovation has shifted eastward, and the message is unmistakable. Necessity breeds reinvention, and ambition rewrites destiny. The Huawei Mate 70 isn't merely a product. It's a symbol of a new era where connection knows no boundaries, and innovation belongs to those bold enough to build it when the world stands against them.